Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another product review. And today's product that we're going to be taking a look at is a SIG factory replacement barrel to convert your SIG P226 from 40 Smith & Wesson to 357 SIG. Now 357 SIG might be my favorite handgun caliber. I find it to be absolutely fascinating. I find it to be well designed, and I really like the ballistics. Now if you don't know what 357 SIG is, I don't blame you. It is definitely not the most popular caliber out there. It was a cartridge that was invented in the 1990s, I believe the mid 1990s, around 1996, and the idea was to create a caliber for a semi-automatic handgun that emulated the ballistics of a 357 Magnum. And essentially what you have is a 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge that is necked down to accept a 9mm projectile. And the projectile diameter is 0.355 versus the 357 Magnum, which is 0.357. So it's called 357 SIG, but the bullet diameter actually isn't 357, it's 355, just like 9mm. Now, like all calibers, and by the way, I don't want to get into the caliber wars today. I personally like 357 SIG. I know there's some other great YouTubers out there that say it's not all it's cracked up to be, and that is perfectly fine. It's just my favorite, but I'm going to tell you guys why, what I like and don't like about the caliber. But before I do, and even though I talk about this company and all of my range reports today as a product review, I do want to thank Brownworks, which is my primary sponsor for my channel, for helping me provide all of the ammunition for all of my videos. So today I'm going to be shooting both 40 Smith & Wesson and 357 SIG, and this can get a little bit on the expensive side for just a product review. And so I want to thank my primary sponsor, Brownworks. You guys know I talk about Brownworks in every single one of my range reports, and Brownworks is a custom grip company. Mark over there is an artist. He's a craftsman. He can make a wide variety of grips out of a wide variety of exotic woods and materials for a wide variety of firearms, including guns like the SIGs. Yeah, I know if you guys like fine firearms, you guys might want to customize them to your heart's desire. And let me tell you, Mark can hook you up. He can put on custom logos, custom engravings. He can make anything you can imagine. He can also create awesome wood grips for guns like AR-15s, and he can laser engrave magazines like PMags for both the AR-15 and the AK-47. So he has things not only for people looking for grips, but also people that like modern sporting rifles. So I'm going to put a link in the description and as a pinned comment. I'm going to ask you guys to go over there. Please go check out his website. Thank him for supporting the Texas Gun Vault, because he makes all of this possible. And when you do, please tell him the Texas Gun Vault sent you. Alright, so let's start off by talking about the things that I like and don't like about the 357 SIG. I'm going to show you first what a 40 Smith & Wesson looks like here. We're probably all familiar with this. And then here is the 357 SIG. And as you can see, it is a bottleneck cartridge. And as I mentioned, it's pretty much a 40 Smith & Wesson case necked down to accept a 9mm projectile. It pretty much has the same overall length, but because it uses the 40 Smith & Wesson as its parent case, you can use the same extractor and the same recoil spring and magazine in both firearms. So converting one firearm from one caliber to the other is very easy. All you have to do is replace the barrel. So I'm going to do that right here and show you how quick and easy that is. Of course, I guess it kind of depends on the gun that you are going to convert. Take off the slide, take out the recoil spring, take out the 40 Smith & Wesson barrel, in this case out of this SIG P226 Tac Ops, put in that 357 SIG barrel, put that recoil spring back in, put the slide back on the firearm, and now the gun is chambered in 357 SIG. And as I said, you use the same magazine. So that is pretty darn cool. Now, I do want to say there is one caveat to this video in this particular barrel, and that is this barrel is not cut out in case your SIG has a loaded chamber indicator. So I don't know if they offer one with or without, and I know different SIG models, even within the same P series gun, like some P226s have them, some do not. You have to make sure you buy the right barrel for your gun. In fact, when Ken loaned me this particular barrel recently, he actually lent a different gun that it did not work on. So this one does not have a loaded chamber indicator, so I needed this not to have the loaded chamber indicator cut. So you just got to make sure you have the right barrel for your particular SIG firearm. So now let's talk about ballistics. Now, I am not a ballistics expert, so I know some people in the comments really know a lot, but I'm going to try to give what I understand is the general overview. As I mentioned, 357 SIG was designed to emulate the 357 Magnum. However, it does fall a little short. Now, a lot of people today say this is an antiquated cartridge because you have 9mm plus P or plus P plus. You also have 40 Smith & Wesson plus P that can give very similar ballistics and velocities. However, there is one thing about the 9mm plus P plus that you should understand is that plus P plus is not a SAMI specification, but a gun chambered in 357 SIG, which is going to have very similar pressures and very similar velocities, is actually a SAMI spec cartridge, so guns can be designed safely for that caliber. And essentially, if you're not happy with the ballistics of 9mm and you want something going down range at a lot more velocity, 357 SIG might be the cartridge for you. Now, when it comes to feeding, this is what I think is the big advantage to 357 SIG, because it is a bottlenecked cartridge. It feeds more reliably because when it's pulling it out of the magazine and loading it into the chamber, you have a smaller diameter front of the cartridge going into a much larger chamber. Unlike 40 Smith & Wesson, which is a non-bottlenecked cartridge, 357 just generally feeds more reliably. Yeah, so you do have that. To me, that is one of the huge advantages of this cartridge. Now, there are a couple things about this cartridge that I think are disadvantages. And yes, as I said, I love 357 SIG, but there is a disadvantage to this cartridge. And for me, that is going to be the report and the pressure. Now, both 40 Smith & Wesson and 357 SIG are a very high pressure pistol cartridge. So what does this really mean? Well, number one, the report of the firearm is going to be much louder, even louder than 40 Smith & Wesson. But also that prevents you from really being able to suppress 357 SIG like you can 9mm. Yes, you can suppress 357 SIG, but it's never going to be as quiet as 9mm. Also, because of the higher pressures, I find that any gun that is ported and it's chambered in 357 SIG is not that comfortable to shoot. So I think you get rid of most of the ported options and you get rid of most of the suppression options. Now, that doesn't mean you can't port it or that you can't suppress it. It's just not as effective as other calibers. And for me, that really is kind of the big downside to this. All right, so I've talked a little bit about what I like and what I don't like about this cartridge. And yes, it is expensive and a little bit harder to find, and there's not as many guns chambered for it. But once again, I said, this is a really interesting and ballistically innovative cartridge. So I really wish it would have caught on. I know that a few law enforcement agencies like the Texas Rangers and the U.S. Secret Service have used the 357 SIG in the past for these various reasons. I honestly feel like the civilian market should have picked it up more than it really did. So today, it's not necessarily a boutique caliber, it's just really hard to find, it's really expensive, and it's not as common as 9, 40, and 45. But really, I think from a ballistic standpoint, from a function standpoint, it should have gotten a lot more traction. All right, so let's get this gun to the range. Once again, it is a SIG P226 TAC Ops, which I actually did a range report on, and maybe I will put that range report on this particular firearm in the description below if you want to go check that out. And of course, that range report was when this thing was chambered in 40. But what I'm going to do now is go to the range, and I'm going to shoot this both in 40 and 357 SIG. So every time you see me shoot at a different range, the left-hand target will be for 40, the right-hand target will be for 357 SIG. I will tell you my thoughts and opinions after shooting at each distance and what I kind of discover when it comes to shooting this gun. So let's go to the range, let's shoot this 226 in both 40 and 357 SIG. And as you saw, we started off at 7 yards and I put 10 rounds of 40 and 10 rounds of 357 SIG through this. I was happy with both groups. I actually thought that I shot 357 SIG just a little bit better. And I think when it comes to the recoil impulse, while many people say you can't tell a difference, I kind of think that I can. And that just has to do with the laws of physics. After all, a 40 caliber projectile is typically going to be heavier than a 357 SIG. And every time you have an action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So the energy that's coming back into your hand shooting 40, I think, is a little bit more. And I think that I can feel it. Now, when it comes to the report of the firearm, let me tell you, 357 SIG has a much higher pitch. You know, when it comes to suppressors, people talk about tone as much as they do decibels. And the tone of a suppressor, or I think the tone of a cartridge in this case, is worthy of talking about. 357 SIG is just higher pitch. It has more higher overtones. It's a smaller projectile coming out of a smaller bore at a higher velocity. I actually think this is something to think about beyond just suppression, but if you ever had to use a 357 SIG in a defensive use, you actually might get more hearing damage shooting it unprotected than you would 40 Smith & Wesson. Now, neither are ideal, and I also understand that in a defensive gun use, your hearing loss is going to be the last thing you're thinking about because you just want to survive. But it is something to think about if you are considering carrying 357 SIG. But for me, the recoil is a little bit less, its tone is a little bit higher, and I seem to shoot 357 SIG just a little bit better. All right, so now let's set out the target at 15 yards. We're going to double this distance, do the same test, and see what happens to my groups and if I discover anything else. And so at 15 yards, my groups seem to be about the same. They're off to the left just a little bit, which I know is more me than the firearm. When I reviewed this and did the range report on this gun, I shot it exactly the same way. I think it has to do with the length of pull. So when it comes to the accuracy of both calibers, they're going to be pretty much exactly the same. It's all going to mostly depend on the shooter or you and how well you shoot the gun, regardless of the caliber. And so all of my thoughts are going to be the same as it was at the shorter distance. distance. The only thing that changed a little bit was the grouping. The gun just, in my opinion, shoots a little bit more pleasurably when it comes to recoil with a 357 SIG, and the report once again is just a little bit louder. So speaking of using a gun like this in a defensive scenario, I'm going to do one more test before I give you guys my final thoughts. I'm just going to do a mag dump of 10 or 15 rounds on both calibers once again, because I want to see if there's any difference when it comes to the muzzle flip and the muzzle rise. Because if you're going to shoot this gun fast, you definitely want to keep all those rounds on target. So let me shoot this gun fast, and then I'll give you guys my final thoughts. And I honestly think I can shoot the 357 SIG just a little bit better. It has a little bit less muzzle rise, but shooting it fast pointed out one more thing to me in that low light situation. 357 SIG just seems to have a little bit more muzzle flash than 40. So I guess depending on where you're going to carry or when you're going to carry, that might be a consideration. After all, this is going to be a higher pressured cartridge. So just have to think about that, and if you might be sensitive to those flashes. I know that some people don't like cartridges at all that have any type of muzzle flash. They're like, oh, it hurts my eyes, or oh, it obstructs my view of the sight, or whatever. But if you are one of those people, that is something to take into consideration. But I think shooting it fast, 357 SIG just has a little bit less muzzle rise. So what are my final thoughts when it comes to the factory replacement SIG barrel for the SIG P226? Well, it ran flawlessly. Of course, it is an OEM product for the gun, so I expect it to run great. And the huge advantage about having this barrel with a 40 Smith & Wesson is that you can interchange them. So let's say you want to carry 357 SIG, but you don't want to train with it all the time. You can pop in the other barrel, and of course 40 is a lot more affordable and more easily available. And you get about the same feel when you're shooting it. So you can train with both calibers. You can have a gun chambered in 2 calibers with only having to change one part. I think it is a great idea. And when this caliber came out, I sure wish it would have taken off more. I think it's just a fantastic cartridge. It is great for defense. It is probably great for competition shooting. I just don't know why it never caught on. It is just a wonderful, well thought out, innovative caliber. And maybe it had to do with the fact that it started off on SIG. Not everybody owned SIG in the 1990s like they do today. It just didn't catch on. But other companies have made guns chambered for this, like HK, like Glock, you name it, you can buy it. Or if you have your 40 Smith & Wesson, many times companies will also offer 357 SIG barrels in the aftermarket for your guns if it doesn't come OEM. So you just get 2 calibers in one gun, and they're going to run reliably, especially this SIG barrel. So I'm really happy with this thing. No problems. Accuracy is great. The option of having a conversion is great, and I think ballistically the 357 SIG is the superior cartridge, and I know that is my personal opinion. So on my star system, how would I rate the SIG conversion barrel in 357 SIG for the P226? Well, I give it 5 out of 5 stars. It does everything it's supposed to do. It gives you more caliber options. It's accurate. It's a drop-in conversion, so no gunsmithing is needed. It's awesome. I absolutely love it, and I personally think if you own or like 40 Smith & Wesson, you need to give 357 SIG a try. And it's a really easy way of getting into 357 SIG without having to spend a lot of money. If you already got a 40, like a 226 or maybe a 229, all you have to do is go out and buy the conversion barrel. I know it's really easy to do on Glocks as well, and people do it all the time. Just give it a shot. You can buy these barrels relatively affordable as compared to having to buy a whole gun. So 5 out of 5 stars for the SIG conversion barrel. I just love 357 SIG, and thank you, Ken, for giving me the opportunity to go to the range and shoot it again. So let me know what you guys think. Do you guys own any guns in 357 SIG? Do you like 357 SIG? And if you own 40, did I convince you at all to go give it a try? I would love to know in the comment section below. So, as always, thanks for watching.